Hey everyone, this is George Couros, and welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. I recently wrote a blog post called Don't Get Used to the Smell, Knowing When It's Time to Move On. And it was talking about a job I had early on in my life where I actually worked at a pig farm. I know people are looking at me like, this guy totally into manual labor. It's like, I'm terrible with my hands. I can't build anything. But that's what I did. I needed to work, and it was a temp job. And when I got this job, I actually went to a pig farm, and I had to clean up crap. Is really what I actually had to do. And I noticed that what does this have to do with education? There's a lot actually, and especially where you are in your job, how you feel valued, appreciated. I remember I had to go there because there was a sickness there, and I had to clean up the stuff, and there's people did it. It was like literally a 24/7 job for a few months. And it was a temp position. They didn't think I'd actually take it. And then I accepted it. I only lasted one day, but I remember actually pulling up to this farm, and it stunk so bad. It was so bad. And I was so grossed out. And then I walked in and I was like, it is so bad. And I think about this all the time because after a little while in that barn, I got used to the smell. And then I remember actually walking out at the end of the night, and I was like, oh my God, it smells so nice. What actually stunk before felt like fresh air all of a sudden. And the reason I say this has something to do with education is a lot of people will stick in a job and they don't realize how bad it is until they actually look outside themselves. And that was kind of the premise of my post, is that sometimes you got to kind of step outside to realize what your current situation is, because sometimes we get used to the smell, which is hence the title, and we kind of disconnect. And I shared this blog post out with a bunch of people, or sort of with my email list, and you can subscribe to it. You'll see a link to the email list down below. And so many people reached out to me about really tough situations that we're in education. And I have, because of that experience, when I was younger, I tend to kind of get perspective and think like, should I stay in this job? Should I stay in this role? And I will tend to like leave early rather than stay too long. And maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe that's not the best advice, but I'll tell you what is good advice. Don't stay in a place you don't feel valued. And that's something that you shouldn't do. And so many people shared experiences they had, struggles they had. And I thought about it a lot. And a lot of people see me as a speaker. They see me as someone who writes books, but they might not see like I've had a ton of failure in my life. So I wanted to do this series, and it's just 3 stories that I wanted to share with you and my perspectives of them. And this is based on an email and you'll see the link down below. And I just want to share a short story with you, and I'm going to do this the next few weeks, or you'll see them spread out over time. Just kind of talking about my failure and what I took away, because sometimes the best things that happen are the things that don't happen, or the things that you walk away from. So I'm going to share a little bit more context than what you're going to read in this email. And the blog post that I shared, the quote from it comes from Chris Grosser, and this is something I truly believe. And I actually have this written up in my home gym, is that opportunities don't happen, you create them. The idea that everything happens for a reason is something I believe, but what you do next is up to you, right? Things will happen, but what you do next will actually really ultimately be up to you. So the first of the 3 stories that I want to share with you is my first job interview in education. Now, I joke about this, but it's actually true. I never wanted to go in teaching until I saw the movie Billy Madison. I saw, kids playing around, this young guy, and it just looked fun. And it inspired me to try to become a kindergarten teacher. And that was my goal. I wanted to be a kindergarten teacher. I love working with younger students. And I applied for several kindergarten positions, coming out of university. And then I got an interview. It took so long to get an interview. It was really hard. It sounds like an old man, because I kind of am. It's really hard to get it was really hard to get a job in education at the time. And you'd have to, it was very limiting. So I was so excited I got an interview for a kindergarten position. And I remember going through this interview, and it was going amazingly well. Like I was actually shocked at how well it was going, and I felt a good vibe with the people, and they seemed really interested in the work that I was doing. And it was my first interview in the profession, so I had really nothing to compare it to. But I just felt like, hey, I know what they're asking me. I feel like I'm providing really good answers. There's a good chemistry, in the process. But I also noticed they kept asking me about a high school technology job, about high school or about technology. And the reason I say this is because I made a website when I was in university as part of a student council. And it was not because I was really interested in technology. I just wanted to get on the student council, and it was literally the only job opportunity that existed, and nobody ran for it. So I actually won by default. It was something that you would vote for, but no one else ran because nobody wanted to do it. And I got it. And so I made this website once, and once was enough to throw it on a resume. And they kept asking me about it over and over again. I'm like, this is really weird, because what does this have to do with kindergarten? Like me making this website. So it's just kind of a foreshadow to what actually, would happen later. So I walk away from the interview. I'm feeling really, really good and so appreciative. They actually called me that same day, and they said, hey, you were great. We really enjoyed you. We know you're going to have a great career in education, but we just didn't feel you're the right fit for this job. And I was like disappointed, but this is my first interview. I kind of expected that. And, I was frustrated, but I have this craving. And I think it's probably because of sports. I love being coached, and I wanted to get better. I wanted to improve. So, 2 weeks goes by. I'm still applying for jobs, not getting any interviews. So I actually ended up calling the superintendent, who was actually in on the interview, which I think is rare, even to this day. For a superintendent to be on an interview for teachers. And so I called and I said, hey, first of all, I want to thanks for you for, having me interview. It was so, such a great experience for me, but I want to know how I can get better. Is there any advice that you'd actually give to me to, improve in what I'm doing, things that you can help me move forward? Is there anything you would help? And he said, I'm so glad you actually called, because I was going to call you today, and we're going to offer you a high school technology job. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? So the reason they actually kept asking me about this high school technology position, about the website, is because they knew that there's an opportunity that might open up. And that's a whole other story on why that opened up, that they needed someone to fill high school technology, but they could not find anybody. And in the interview, I don't even know if they interviewed me because they're interested in me becoming a kindergarten teacher, or they saw that my technology on the resume. So we actually, he offered me a job, but I was like, this is not what I want to do. I didn't want to teach high school. That was never something I was interested in. I actually swore I would never teach middle school or high school, and I actually ended up teaching both and loved them. But I wasn't ready. I didn't feel I was ready for it at that time. And so they offered me this position, and they said, hey, just you have 4 days to decide. So take some time, and just let us know when you're ready. So I actually remember contacting my Mandy Osmond. That was actually her name, Mandy Osmond, who was my intern teacher in Osler, Saskatchewan. She was so great to me, and I asked her for advice. I'm like, what would you do? She's like, I would take a job, because it is hard to get a job. And if you can get your foot in the door, then it'll open up opportunities for you. So I was like, she's right. So I ended up taking this job, and I didn't really know much about technology. I made a website once sitting with some guy who basically did it for me, and then I threw it on a resume. So I know a little bit, but at the time, a little bit seemed like a ton in the area of technology, at least for that school district. So I would go into the class, and I actually would be there probably about an hour earlier before the students, and I would go through these modules to try to figure out how to do this stuff. I had no clue. And so I had a little bit of knowledge, but even in the class, because it was kind of like it was module based at the time, I did teach some math. I did teach some other subjects that I was actually a little bit more comfortable with, but the technology one terrified me. So I learned a lot through that process, but I also I would never be hesitant to ask students like, hey, I'm trying to figure this out. Does anyone know what they're doing? Does anyone know how to do this? And students would be like, yeah, of course. And they would go out of their way to show me new ideas. They knew I was new. It was like they were kind of pulling for me as well. But when they found out I didn't know something and I was willing to ask, it didn't actually discredit me. They felt really empowered in the class. And you saw that class really come together to kind of work together. And this is something I believe is that the whole of the classroom will always be smarter than the teacher as an individual. So kind of going through that process, I really enjoyed it. It really kind of shaped my thinking. I got better in a content area that I wasn't really comfortable with. And they actually said, hey, this job is not going to be open next year, but we'll do our best to find you a job. And then at the end of the year, they said, hey, it actually is open now. We'd love to offer you this. And I was like, I don't know. So I actually got another offer for an elementary position that also is halftime elementary and halftime tech coordinator for a school. And I had literally taught for 2.5 months, and they offered it to me to be a tech coordinator. I haven't even taught for a full year, but teaching high school technology gave me so much advantage to do technology. Cause like if I could make a website and I had, a certain knowledge, now I'm like actually have a job as a high school tech teacher. I must know what I'm talking about. So I actually took that job, and I really wanted that kindergarten job. I really wanted to do that, and it didn't work out. And I'm glad it didn't work out. Sometimes and this was my takeaway, and I wrote with this. Sometimes the job you want is not as good as the job you end up getting, but your attitude towards the opportunity can often determine the outcome. I wasn't ready, and sometimes the best opportunities you have are the ones you're not quite ready for, but you can do, right? It might challenge you, it might push you, but when you have that belief in yourself, it really can open up some doors to you. But that job totally changed the trajectory of my career. That first 2 months of my teaching career put me in a totally different pathway. I would have probably never focused on innovation. I would have never really probably had the demeanor that I do to really go into rooms knowing that I am just one person in that room that can really learn from the skills of others. So that really helped shape who I am today. So I always think about that, how I wanted something so bad, and when I didn't get it, it actually worked out for the best. And so I share that with you because what could have been seen as a failure actually was the exact opposite. But it wasn't because I just let it be. I asked for feedback. I reached out to the person. I always think about this. Would he have actually called me if I didn't call him? To show how interested I was, how badly I wanted a job, how much I was willing to grow. Was he going to actually call me that day? Maybe he was, but maybe it wasn't. I showing that initiative, asking for feedback, really was really beneficial. One of the things that I did as an administrator, whenever we didn't offer people jobs, I would always take time to say like, hey, here's we didn't offer you the job, but here's some feedback I want you to do because I want you to be successful in the next opportunity that you have. I want you to, get that job. And what's beautiful about that, I knew it was so beneficial when someone sat down with me and would give me feedback and, help me out, that I wanted to offer it without someone having to ask. And I remember one time somebody applied for a job at my school and she didn't get it, but I spoke to her for an hour and said, hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And then she got an interview a week later and she got the job. And she reaches out to me all the time, and how grateful she was to me that I spent that time with her, how grateful she was that I didn't give her the job, but I helped her to get the next one. Because if we're really for kids, I want to make sure that if you are a teacher going into any school, whether it's mine or not, you are successful. Because if you're successful, that means the kids you serve are successful as well. And I don't know if I would have thought about that if I didn't actually not get that first job. So I think sometimes, as I said, the thing that you want so bad can actually, when you don't get it, could actually work out for the best. So that's just one of the stories of, some of the failures that I've actually, a failure that I've actually learned from. I would love to hear about some of your things that you didn't happen, some of your takeaways from this, but you can check out the links to what I talked about. I'll share a story next week as well, and kind of how it shaped me. But thanks for being here. I hope you got some of this podcast. Have a wonderful day. Take care.